Okay folks, buckle up. Today on the Mysteria Archive, we're diving into Project Looking Glass. Now, this has been covered many times before, but we're taking a slightly different approach, so get ready for a wild ride. What if the future wasn't just coming, but was already written, and someone read it, then quietly rewrote the ending? You're standing in a quiet room, the lights hum. In the center sits a machine, no wires, no buttons, just a pulse. Like it's waiting. They say this device, Project Looking Glass, could bend time. Not forward, not back, but sideways. Some say it saved us. Others say it doomed us to a timeline somebody else chose. But here's the weirdest part. What happens when you look at the future long enough that it starts looking back? Okay, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like the plot twist of a Christopher Nolan movie written during a caffeine overdose. But hey, that's what makes it fun, right? Now, whether or not Looking Glass was a real thing or just internet lore doing backflips, it taps into something that kinda haunts all of us. The idea that someone somewhere knows what's going to happen. And maybe, just maybe, they're nudging it one way or another. Honestly, if someone is editing the timeline, I hope they're at least proofreading. Now, we're not here to convince, debunk, or declare any ultimate truths. We're here to explore a story, one filled with speculative ideas, strange claims, and theories that might sound unbelievable, or strangely familiar. It's all presented for entertainment, curiosity, and critical thinking. So, let's ask the weird questions and see where they take us, because this story goes from interesting to wait what, real fast. The myth begins. Where did this story come from? The story of Project Looking Glass doesn't begin with headlines, documents, or even credible whistleblowers. It begins in whispers. Names like Dan Burisch and Bill Wood crop up in interviews from the early 2000s, claiming they were part of a covert project that used recovered ancient technology to glimpse the future. Not predict it, observe it, as if the future were a place and they had a window. Their accounts describe a device, circular, maybe 9 feet across, activated by consciousness. Not so much a machine as a mirror. You didn't control it, you synced with it, and it showed you probabilities, diverging timelines, events that didn't happen yet, but might. Now, the connection to ancient tech supposedly goes back to discoveries in Iraq, which some link lightly to the idea of stargates. Not literal wormholes, but gateways to awareness hidden in ancient structures. Now let's hit pause, because here's where it gets tricky. There's no physical proof, no photos, no leaked documents that pass the smell test, just strange accounts, vague, dramatic, strangely similar. But stories persist for a reason. Myths survive not because they're true, but because they speak to something deeper, fear, hope. The need to believe that someone, somewhere, knows what's really going on. And sometimes, when multiple people tell variations of the same outlandish tale, it's not proof of conspiracy, it's proof of narrative gravity. The kind of story that pulls people in because it reflects something we all wonder. Is the future fixed? Or is someone already living in it, watching us try to catch up? Alright, so if you've ever thought, hey, this sounds like a mashup of Stargate, Inception, and every show that got cancelled after one mysterious season, well, you're not wrong. The origin of this myth is less top-secret briefing and more campfire ghost story told by ex-intelligence operatives on a podcast at 2 AM, which, honestly, is my favourite genre. But even without proof, the tale sticks because it plays with something timeless. The idea that knowledge of the future is both powerful and super cursed. Like, yeah, I'd love to know if my Wednesday is going to be chaotic, but also, maybe don't show me how it ends. And let's be real, if there was a future-peaking device, it probably predicted TikTok and shut itself off in shame. The alleged technology, how did it work? Alright, so what exactly was Looking Glass supposed to be? According to the story, the device wasn't a time machine in the DeLorean sense. There were no flux capacitors or glowing portals. It was said to be a set of spherical fields, maybe electromagnetic, maybe something stranger, interfacing with the user's consciousness. Picture this. A person enters a controlled space, stands at the center of a field and syncs with the device. What they see isn't a fixed future, but probabilities, branching timelines, alternate outcomes. Not from prophecy, but perception. Now, here's where it gets wild. Observers noticed something. The outcomes changed depending on who was using the device. Like quantum particles shifting under observation, the future didn't just reveal itself, it reacted. In some accounts, users began to see convergence, futures collapsing into one dominant path. Others said the timelines grew more chaotic the more the machine was used. But here's the twist not everyone talks about. What if the convergence wasn't because futures were fixed, but because people began acting like they were? In quantum physics, this is a real thing, the observer effect. The act of watching can influence the thing being watched. It's kind of like watching the end of a movie, then trying to improv your way through the first scene without spoiling it. Some theorists say that Looking Glass didn't predict doom, it revealed how dangerous our belief in inevitability could be. So, maybe the real risk wasn't the machine, it was us, believing the future couldn't be changed. Okay, so let me get this straight. This thing wasn't just Google Calendar but for 2047, it was like psychic Netflix for all possible futures. That's comforting. Also, the idea that reality changes depending on who's watching, that makes me want to send the whole multiverse to therapy. But seriously, this whole observation affects outcome thing is legit science adjacent. In the quantum world, the mere act of looking at a particle changes how it behaves. So, if a machine could magnify that on a human scale, it's less time travel and more time tuning. Anyway, if the timelines really were collapsing just because we looked, someone owes us a cosmic spoiler warning. Thought weapon. What if it wasn't a machine at all? But here's a curveball almost no one explores. What if Looking Glass wasn't a machine? What if it was a method, a way of thinking so powerful it changed the trajectory of events not by force, but by intention? Imagine this. You build an algorithm, not a physical device, but a thought process. You combine deep intuition, symbolic logic, predictive modeling, and a framework of possible futures. Then you ask, which of these paths leads to collapse, and how do we avoid it? It sounds abstract, but this isn't so far-fetched. Cognitive science shows we're constantly simulating futures, playing mental chess against outcomes we haven't lived yet. Now, from gut instincts to dreams, our brains are forecasting machines. Some experiments even suggest our subconscious can react to stimuli before they happen. Not proof of time travel, but of time perception, working in ways we don't fully understand. What if Looking Glass was tapping into that? Forget machinery, forget alien tech. This version of the story says the real device was consciousness trained to read complex inputs and intuit the shape of time. A pattern recognition engine with a soul. If you've ever had déjà vu, or that weird moment where you make a decision and instantly feel the ripple of it, that's the mind running a simulation in real time. So, maybe the secret wasn't hidden in a lab or a black site. Maybe it was inside us the whole time. Okay, not to get all Yoda with a PhD, but this section is giving serious inner temple vibes. Like, forget building machines, what if your brain is the time machine? The idea that Looking Glass was more mental than mechanical kind of flips the whole conspiracy on its head. Suddenly it's less Area 51 and more Area Me. And now I'm wondering if my weird dreams about parallel parking into the ocean are actually secret timelines trying to warn me. But jokes aside, this version feels way less fringe. Predictive thinking, instinct precognition, it's not sci-fi, it's cognitive science, just with way more existential dread. So yeah, maybe the future isn't just waiting to be seen, maybe it's waiting to see how we look at it. Future loops in history, glimpses of the impossible. Here's a strange thought. What if we've already seen the future? Not through a machine, but through decisions that feel too precise, too timely, almost like someone peeked ahead, then quietly nudged history. Let's rewind. In the early 1980s, a single man sitting in a Soviet control room chose not to launch retaliatory nuclear missiles after detecting what looked like a US strike. It turned out to be a false alarm. But how did he know? Instinct, luck, or foreknowledge? Jump to think tanks like RAND, long known for scenario planning. Some of their predictive models in the Cold War eerily resemble events that happened decades later. Coincidence? Or precognition refined by an algorithm? Then there's the rise of forecasting systems, early versions of quantum computing, game theory, AI modeling. These weren't time machines, but they were the next best thing, simulations of tomorrow, designed to influence decisions today. Now, imagine someone had access to something more, a method or tool that could scan probable futures. If you knew a disaster was on the path ahead, would you steer into it to learn more, or swerve and pray you made the right call? Now, some theorists say that's exactly what happened. We avoided collapse, not by accident, but by design. But here's where it gets creepy. The more you change the future, the less stable it becomes. Like editing a paragraph so many times, it starts to lose its meaning. Maybe the reason we keep hitting weird loops, recurring events, déjà vu moments, unexpected echoes, is because someone hit rewind too often. And if Looking Glass was real, maybe history has already been edited. Okay, quick question. Have you ever had that moment in history class where you thought, wait, that decision was weirdly well timed? Same. Now, this section dives into those moments, times when the timeline felt curated, like someone was editing reality with a very nervous backspace key. Now, I'm not saying there's a secret league of time consultants meeting under a volcano, but if there were, they probably wear suits and never blink. And honestly, with all the forecasting tools and simulations we already have, maybe Looking Glass didn't need to exist physically. Maybe it was policy modeling, turned up to 11. Still, if we've already used it to dodge disaster, I'd really like to know when they plan to fix rush hour traffic. Just saying. The echo of consciousness, simulation or synchronicity. Let's zoom out, way out. What if Looking Glass wasn't just about seeing the future, but about understanding how consciousness shapes it? Now, here's where we shift from hardware to headspace. Philosophers and physicists alike have toyed with the idea that consciousness isn't just a passenger on the ride, it's the GPS. What we focus on, what we fear, what we imagine may bend the trajectory of events more than we realize. That's where synchronicity comes in. You think about someone and they call. You question reality and suddenly you see patterns everywhere. These aren't just coincidences, they're echoes, feedback. Little nudges suggesting that maybe the simulation is listening. And that's the twist, simulation theory, the idea that we're living in a hyper-advanced construct, not unlike a game. And if that's true, then consciousness might not just be the key, it might be the code. Maybe Looking Glass didn't give us control, maybe it gave us awareness. A way to understand that time, thought, and experience aren't linear. They're looped, synced, and possibly observed. And maybe that's why it was shut down. You don't hand a mirror to a species that still lies to itself, especially not ones that weaponizes its reflections. Whether simulation or synchronicity, the implication is the same. You're not just in the story, you might be helping write it. Which brings us back to the watcher idea. Maybe the future isn't being observed by outsiders. Maybe the observers are us, from different points in the loop. Or worse, maybe the act of wondering is what triggers the echo. Okay, that one was a mind-bender. So, we're either in a simulation or the universe is the sentient feedback loop that plays jazz with our thoughts. Cool. Now, the part that gets me, the idea that just thinking about the future changes it. That every time we imagine a possibility, we nudge it closer or further away. I mean, my brain can't even stay focused during cereal commercials, and now it's supposed to be influencing the space-time continuum. And the "you don't give a mirror to a species that lies to itself" line? Oof, that hits harder than my internet bill. Look, whether it's simulation code or some cosmic prank, the echo theory makes one thing clear. Reality might be less about what's true and more about what we believe is possible. Why the story won't die, the emotional utility of Looking Glass. Let's face it, some stories just refuse to die. And Looking Glass, it's one of them. Now, it's tempting to think people cling to stories like this because they want them to be true. But maybe it's the opposite. Maybe they need them to be true because the alternative is just too random. In chaotic times, stories like Looking Glass give us the illusion of structure, that someone somewhere knows what's going on, even if it's a secret, strange, or buried in redacted files. It's like ancient myth all over again. We used to tell stories about gods watching us from the skies. Now it's predictive AI models and theoretical time machines. Same archetype, new wardrobe. And here's where things get interesting. Modern institutions do use future simulation tech just not in a glowing sphere in the desert. Think Foresight Labs, cognitive modeling, risk analysis systems. Companies like Palantir, think tanks like RAND or DARPA, they run what-if scenarios all the time. That doesn't make them mystical, it makes them responsible. But to the public, it can start to feel like someone else is steering the timeline. So maybe Looking Glass isn't a lost project. Maybe it's a metaphor we return to when reality starts glitching. It's not about proving a device existed. It's about believing someone, anyone, is watching the clock and making sure we don't hit midnight. Because sometimes, even the illusion of guidance is enough to calm the chaos. And in that sense, Looking Glass is less of a conspiracy and more of a collective coping mechanism. Okay, time for some therapy. Ever notice how when the world gets weird, people start talking about secret timelines and hidden knowledge? That's not a coincidence, it's emotional insulation. And we want there to be a looking glass because the alternative is that no one's driving the bus and it's heading downhill with no brakes. Now, even if the machine never existed, the idea of it helps people organize fear into a story. It's like a bedtime story for grown-ups who don't trust the news. And hey, if predictive AI systems are basically Looking Glass 2.0, I just hope they stop recommending me the same 3 songs on Spotify. Future Sight's cool, but can we please get some better playlists? Let's bring it back to the big question. Did they see the future and change it? Honestly, there are 3 answers. Option 1. Yes, Looking Glass was real. The tech worked, the future was catastrophic. And someone, somewhere, made decisions that shifted us to a better outcome. Option 2. No. It was a myth, an echo of Cold War paranoia and sci-fi fever dreams. But it still matters because sometimes the belief in something powerful can shape culture, behavior, even policy. And then there's option 3. What if Looking Glass isn't gone? What if it was never a device, but a human ability? Because every time we game out what might happen, every time we change our behavior based on possible outcomes, we're running a simulation. And maybe that's the real machine, not some top secret tech, but us. We imagine the future, we adjust to it, and in doing so, we change it. So maybe Project Looking Glass didn't end in a lab. Maybe it evolved into millions of tiny time travelers, us, making choices based on fears, dreams, and the stories we tell. And if someone did see a darker version of reality, maybe what we're living in now is the best version they could save. Which leaves one final question. If you could see what's coming, truly see it, would you change course? Or would you freeze and hope the future forgets to show up? All right, now we're in full Twilight Zone territory. But let's be real, it's kind of awesome, right? The idea that we are the Looking Glass, that every what if we run in our heads is part of a living simulation. It's like giving your anxiety a time machine and saying, go nuts. But hey, there's comfort in that. Well, we might not have a glowing orb in the basement, but we do have imagination. And imagination can steer us away from danger, or towards it. So, if we're the ones holding Looking Glass now, maybe it's time we stop watching the future and start writing it. Or, at the very least, update the ending. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this one. And let me know in the comments below of videos you'd like to see next. And don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. I need this channel to grow if it's going to survive, and only you can help with that. So, thank you for the help. Okay, friends, until next time, stay curious.